Hello everyone, my name is Alex. I'm a 2000 rated over-the-board chess player, and in this series we're going from 1500 to 2000 elo in chess.com rapid games, where I'll be explaining my thought process as best as I possibly can for your education and entertainment. Today my opponent opens with the Reti with knight to f3. I basically play c6 against literally everything, and if you have been on my channel before or you've seen some of my other videos from the black side, you'll know this. And my opponent goes for d4, so now we can just transpose into a normal Slav defense with the move d5. Sorry, let me just adjust my camera. I like the move c6 on move 1 just because it's quite flexible. My opponent goes c3, and I suppose we'll play symmetrically with knight to f6. Now c3 I would say is a little bit unambitious from white. There is a chance that we get a very, very similar position if my opponent goes bishop to f4, and maybe we go bishop to f5, e3, e6, and it could be completely symmetrical. I mean, there's even lines with like bishop d3, take, bishop d6, take, and all the bishops just come off the board immediately. But we have bishop g5, which changes the game a little bit. So I think we have a couple of options here. The first move that I quite like the look of is knight to e4, just putting pressure on the bishop. One of the nice things about not committing to the move e6 yet, which often happens in these structures with d4, d5, is that the knight isn't actually pinned to the queen, because of course our pawn is still on e7. So we have the liberty to play knight to e4, which I don't see a reason not to play. Also, you'll notice that queen to b6 is a move in many of these positions because the dark squared bishop has abandoned the b2 square. Okay, that is a really odd move. Normally the bishop goes to f4. I don't think there's anything particularly wrong with it, but I would assume it's a bit inaccurate. So, okay, if we go, I mean, maybe my opponent's trying to keep the e-pawn pinned and stop my development from being too quick. But I suppose bishop to f5 makes sense. I mean, queen to b6 also makes sense. But what happens a lot in these structures is both queens will come out to their respective b3 and b6 squares, and you'll get a very interesting stare down where neither side wants to trade queens. So, for example, if white goes queen b3 in this position, and I go queen to b6, I would love white to take, right? And I'll show you after the game what I mean, if I remember. But okay, yeah, I basically love white to take, because after a takes, I open up the a file, and yes, I've got doubled pawns, but the more important thing is the open a file. Similarly, if in this position we have something like queen b6, queen b3, white would happily trade and either take with a knight or take with the a pawn and open up the a file for himself. So my opponent goes knight b to d2, challenging my strong knight in the center of the board. I see no reason to delay the move queen to b6. The move bishop to f5, of course, supports our knight on e4. Because if knight takes, I don't really want to take with the pawn and mess my structure up. By playing queen to b6, I'm also preparing the move pawn to e6, just to open up my bishop to get to the e6 square. Sorry, the d6 square, where it'll be quite nice. Queen c1 is definitely a little bit passive, I suppose. I mean, one of the reasons I like bishop to f5 is it discourages queen c2 or queen b1 defending the pawn. I mean, queen b1's never really going to be played, but more so queen c2, because then we have knight to g3, protecting the bishop, hitting the queen, and hitting the rook. So the queen moves, we take the rook, all is good. So queen c1, I do think queen b3 is probably the better move, but I mean, I'm not going to complain. And I think it's probably a little bit more accurate to start with knight d7, just because I don't want the knight coming to e5, because it's just a strong knight, right? So let's take bishop e4, and now there is no knight e5. That's the entire point, because after takes, I mean, it's okay for white, but it's a bit passive. Sorry, not a bit passive. The structure is messed up a little bit. So he hits my bishop, and I suppose we just drop back. And we probably actually play for the move e5 now, because the knight's abandoned the e5 square. This move doesn't really make sense. I think the idea is that he doesn't want to go pawn to e3, because then I have the option to damage the white pawn structure, which is a consideration. However, I don't think I would actually want to do that, because it opens up the g file, white gets the bishop pair, and I lose my most active piece. I mean, the bishop also can't challenge me, because the queen can't defend this square, because we made the queen move. So I see no reason not to play the move e5. Typically, in the Slav defense, right? Of course, we're not playing mainline theory here, which, I mean, is fine by me. In fact, I'm very happy about it. But in the Slav, typically, you either break with c5 or e5 to challenge this d4 pawn. Now, a lot of the time, this pawn actually does come to c4. Sometimes white plays for e4. But white has done neither of those things. So really, we do need to try and challenge the white center. Knight to b3 is not concerning. We control the c5 square 1, 2, 3 times, so it's never coming in. What it does do, though, is blocks our queen's access to b2. But the knight also kind of sucks. And what... the two moves I'm considering, right, is bishop d6, which is just a good developing move, right? And if white castles kingside, I can maybe open up lines against the king. The other move I'm considering is pawn to a5, because pawn a4 will kick the knight back, and I will take a ton of space on the queen side. Whenever a knight comes to any of these 4 squares in a game of chess, always think, can I push the flank pawn and try and dislodge the knight? And this seems to be one of those cases, because it can't come to c5, and also a4 can't be played to stop my pawn from advancing, because a4, what have we made the queen do? We've made the queen move to c1. What does it no longer do? Protect the b3 square. So if a4, we get a free knight. Thank you very much. I mean, ask questions, guys. When you're playing chess, ask questions. And if you ask the right questions and you ask enough questions, your opponents will make a mistake. If you're finding this video valuable so far, please drop a like and subscribe if you haven't already. I'd really appreciate it. And okay, so of course we are now up a knight, which is fantastic. But we still need to convert this into a victory. So let's get our development finished. Let's get ourselves castled. I know I can play moves like queen c2, trying to offer a queen trade, which would be obviously very good. But we don't need to rush. We don't need to rush. Okay, f4. What's the point of f4? Well, on one hand, white is lashing out because he's down a piece. So he needs to try and make something happen. And of course, he's trying to open lines against the king, potentially. What I'm more concerned about is the safety of my bishop. Because if I play a move like e4, then pawn to f5, and my bishop is trapped because it can't go to h5. So, what about if we take on d4? Now, if my opponent takes back with either pawn, so take, then we will come to e4 and we'll be very happy. However, if we take, I think f5 still traps the bishop. So, I think we should take on f4 first. Obviously, you now can't play f4. You're going to have to take back with the pawn. Then I will put my bishop on e4, and my bishop will be completely safe. So let's do that. Also, if you're thinking, well, this is elementary now, you're up a piece, you're just going to win the game. I mean, yeah, most likely we will just win the game. But I know a lot of you guys watching, if I was playing the white side of this position against you, you would probably find a way to mess it up. And that's not me insulting you. But if you're trying to get better at chess, then you need to know how to convert winning positions. I think one of the old world champions, it might have been Lasker, Emmanuel Lasker. I think he said that the hardest position to win is a winning position. I think he said something along those lines. So this is definitely not over. Like, for example, here, I wouldn't want to take, because then we invite the rook to f3, and I mean, maybe white can generate some play against my king, right? So I think it makes far more sense just to support the bishop and trade on my terms. We're not in a rush. Do not rush these decisions, or don't rush to make too many trades at once. Be nice and solid and keep trying to make the best moves in the position. Now, sometimes there will be a case where you can sacrifice like a pawn to secure trading all the pieces or something, and it might not be objectively the best move, but it's incredibly simple. And there I would say, okay, yeah, just sack the pawn, trade all the pieces, and then win the end game because you're up a piece for a pawn, right? Cool. But here, it's not quite so simple because we have a lot of pieces left on the board. So let's not take and activate white's pieces for him. Instead, let's remain not tactical. Let's remain calm and still try to play the best moves. For example, I love the look of the move f5, adding another layer of defense for the bishop. Okay, yeah, that's not concerning. Let's drop the queen back. I know I could have considered moves like queen to c2 offering a queen trade, but again, I don't think it's actually that necessary. I mean, of course, we'll check with the computer after the game, but my thought process is, okay, white's only source of counterplay is to attack me on the king side. So why don't I do something like knight to f6, right? Part of the reason for f5 as well is that rook supports this. Yeah, I mean, my opponent's just shuffling. White has nothing in this position. I'm trying to play it in a way that white has nothing. And it's so bad that he's voluntarily trading with me, which obviously I will take. Okay. We could take with the f-pawn, or we could take with the rook. I think I prefer taking with the rook. I mean, taking with the f-pawn creates a passed pawn, sure, but I think it's easier to actually just keep the e-file open and then dominate the e-file. And if my opponent's going to keep trading with me, then I will happily oblige. This is a strange tactic, or strategy is a better word. Because by removing pieces from the game like this, and doing it on my terms, I mean, white has nothing. Absolutely nothing. So, no complaints from me. And hopefully, yeah, I'm showing you why I love the Slav defense so much and why I play pawn to c6 on move 1 against literally everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything. Okay, rook to f3. I mean, that's not very concerning. I like the look of the move c5 here. Now it feels like time to rip open the center. We have a lot of pressure on d4. This is obviously very weak. b2 is weak. And also, I'd like to try and get my bishop into the game. But if takes, I think I prefer queen takes, because it comes with check and preemptively defends the d5 pawn. I think I quite like that. There is an argument to be made for bishop takes, though. Let me think. Pawn takes, bishop takes, king h1. Oh, queen e6 looks very strong. Not only defending d5, but also supporting rook to e1 or rook to e2 ideas, which looks deadly. So, yeah, that's what I'm going to do. That's what I'm going to do. And I mean, you could play a move like queen c7 here, just adding another attacker to f4, forcing the move g3, playing queen to e7 and trying to dominate the e-file. That would be perfectly reasonable. Also, forcing the move g3 would stop the rook from lifting itself up. Okay, well, that's a free pawn. Thank you very much. That makes my life very easy. And then here we force a queen trade on very easy terms. I mean, there's like no material left for white to work with. There's nothing for white to work with here. The f pawn is probably falling unless he plays the move g3, and then we'll just nab the a pawn anyway, and we'll be up a bishop and 2 pawns. So, I mean, my opponent could try and set some traps of some sort, but I don't really see how. This is a completely dominant position. If he tries rook to d3, I mean, we could just push. We could give a check and then push, which I think I prefer, because if rook d3, bishop c5 check, king g2, pawn d4, then I'm preparing pawn b6, and we create this very nice structure where everything is defended, right? The bishop protects the b pawn protects the bishop, the B pawn protects the A pawn, and the bishop protects the D pawn, and then the rook can go off and do whatever it wants. Okay, that's also a move. Let's, of course, offer a rook trade. And we also want to prepare bishop c5, which we're not able to do if the rook is on c3. And we're also preparing to push the pawn. So a bit surprised my opponent's playing on here, to be honest. Also, I mean, in some ways, was a pretty feeble attempt to fight back. But it's interesting, like, in this position, a5 is so often met with a4 and vice versa. Like, h5 is so often met with h4. A lot of people play it just automatically. And, of course, you should watch for that. But it doesn't just work every single time. Like, chess always has exceptions. And this was a pretty big exception because the knight was just hanging on the b3 square. Here, what I'm doing is I'm creating a force field against the king. It's a concept that I really, really like. So next move, I'm going to put the bishop on d4 because I'm going to create this really, really simple construct where through the placement of my pawns and pieces, the king simply can't enter the position properly. Now, I'm going to give him the 3 square because he's going to give me the last remaining pawn. Yeah, let's just take back. I mean, we could just push. I mean, everything is winning. I'm not sure why people play on when it gets to this point. Maybe he's playing for stalemate, but there's no stalemate here. I mean, obviously, but there's no chance of a stalemate because the king can't try and hide itself amongst the pawns or anything. The best shot would probably be trying to get the king to h5, where more squares are taken up. But, yeah, I mean, there is just no hope here. Let's promote to another queen. Why not? I suppose if here, yeah, that stops it. But let's just give a check. Then we can push. It's actually almost mate because of the way that our piece is suffocating the king. It's almost stalemate as well, except he has this square. So let's just give a check, force the king out. Nice little crisscross. Yeah, don't really know why people play on at this point. It's pretty dire. Pretty dire. I suppose if king g3, we can just go queen g4. King g3, queen g4, and that forces the king over here. Then we shouldn't promote. So watch this. The best idea would be king to h2 here, because if we promote, then it's stalemate, because we're taking up the king's last square. Yeah, that's what he does, which is a smart idea. But of course, we're not going to fall for that. Let's just take on f4 with check. Give the king plenty of different options. Here, the king has the h3 square. So we've always got to make sure the king has somewhere to go. But he only has one square to go to. King h3 and queen to h1 should be checkmate. And my opponent resigns. So I would say a very, very smooth game. I mean, I think that was pretty... not elementary, but like smooth sailing, right? Because obviously my opponent blundered a piece, sure. But I think his understanding of the like middle game coming from the opening didn't really have too much substance. And what I mean by that, I'll show you in the analysis. Okay, so 83.4% accuracy for my opponent, 90 for myself. I'm not sure why it's only 90, because I don't think I made any bad moves, so I don't really understand that. But okay, so game opens with knight to f3, the Reti. I play c6 because I play c6 against everything, and we're inviting my opponent into a Slav defense. I mean, this is literally called the Slav invitation, which he goes for. So we get c3, which I've got to say is very unambitious. Knight to f6. And here, a lot of the time, you'll get this kind of thing where you have bishop f4, bishop f5, pawn e3, pawn e6, bishop d3, take, bishop d6, take. And you'll just get a completely symmetrical position, which is pretty funny. The same thing happens in, or can happen, in the exchange Slav. So here in the exchange Slav Defense, you can get all the knights out. Bishop f4, bishop f5, e3, e6, bishop d3, take, bishop d6, take. It's the exact same concept, right? So I was hoping we didn't get that, and we didn't. My opponent went bishop to g5, which isn't the best move. Now, I went for knight to e4, which the computer prefers queen b6, and after queen b3, it doesn't want to move the knight. It wants bishop to f5. And what I was saying is, white wants you to take. And you'll see, the analysis currently is like minus 0.07, right? So let's call it minus 0.1. If I take, the analysis goes to like plus 0.3. A 0.4 jump for just a trade of pieces, like an equal trade of pieces, is pretty significant, especially when most of you, like, okay, not most of you necessarily, but a lot of beginners would be like, well, you're doubling white's pawns. How is that a bad thing? Well, you're opening up the A file for the rook. In chess, activity is so important. So important. And you can play these positions with black, don't get me wrong. It's not losing or anything, but how are you actually exploiting this b-pawn? Like, how? It's just not happening, right? You can't get a bishop to this diagonal. The only way I've ever done it is getting a bishop to c2, because I have played these types of structures in different positions before. But the pawn can come to b4 in most cases, and then come to b5 even, and try and chip away at my structure, supported by a bishop on this diagonal. But okay, bishop g5, knight e4, hitting the bishop. The bishop really should be coming to f4 here. That's the best move. h4 doesn't really make sense. The only logic I can derive is that he's trying to keep the e-pawn pinned. But that's a very feeble idea because I can just move my queen. Interestingly, when I was playing, I briefly considered the move f6, trying to play e5. And that's actually the computer's third favorite move. A little bit ridiculous. If like knight bd2... Oh, e5 isn't the idea. It's actually g5. Okay, that's nuts. That's just nuts. Okay, no one's ever playing that. Don't play this. Don't play this. I'm begging you. So bishop f5, though, is very good. Knight b to d2 and queen to b6. And here, my opponent went queen c1, which is fine. But I would argue that queen b3 is better. Personally, I think this is easier to play with white. Maybe the reason that he went queen c1 is because he didn't like this. And he went queen c1 because he intended to meet knight takes with queen takes. Maybe that was the point, actually. But okay, queen c1. We go knight d7. e6 is also good. I didn't go for e6 because I thought knight to e5 could be annoying. The computer actually just says play f6. The knight retreats and then g5. And then again go for this. So again, it wants this same kind of structure, which is very interesting. This almost seems London-esque, like Jabava London-esque. For those of you who do play the London, I know that I've been learning it recently. Let me know if this feels similar in any way, because that might be why the computer likes this. But okay, knight e4, bishop e4. Of course, taking with the pawn. I mean, why? Why give yourself a weak pawn and block your bishop's scope? So bishop takes, knight d2, and of course we drop the bishop back. We don't want to trade. e3, which makes sense, and here we go e5, which is the best move, because the knight is no longer defending the e5 square, right? So in the Slav, like I said, either you play something like e6, c5, kind of like in which resembles a Caro or a French, or you go for e5, which is particularly good if you can do it in one move rather than two moves. Taking for white makes no sense. We'll take with the knight. We dominate the light squares. This is actually a little bit like uncomfortable for white because one, we win the bishop pair by force, and two, how is white ever castling? This is a very uncomfortable position for white to try to play. So knight b3, which I did think was a bit dubious, and I was tussling between these two moves. Both of them are good, but I chose a5. And here, it's uncomfortable for white, because what the computer wants to do is go bishop e2, allow a4, and bring the knight back. And white basically has to admit that he was wrong to bring the knight out, has to waste another move retreating, and I've just taken a ton of space on the queen side, right? Kind of restricting white's position, stopping the b-pawn from ever advancing. And also, I'm going to go bishop d6 anyway. My opponent, of course, blundered his knight, which was very nice of him. And here, I just didn't want to do anything crazy. I just wanted to get castled, get developed, take on f4. Here, you got to be a bit careful, right? Like ed4, the computer thinks that we're still completely winning in this position because, I mean, if takes we can take, we're up 3 pawns. Oh no, here you blunder a queen, sorry. Because here we are up 3 pawns, but I'd rather be up a piece. So I take, e takes. Obviously, the threat is f5, which I don't want to allow because I don't want to be up just 1 pawn, right? Let's say a move like rook ac8, take. Why am I just going to be up 1 pawn when I can be up a piece? So ef4, bishop e4. And here I just play very simple chess. I'm trying to limit the scope of the board to the e-file, basically, because it makes it very simple. Drop the queen back, bring the knight in to defend. And I mean, the best move is taking because there's just nothing. White has no play. I mean, rook a to e1, let's say. We can kind of just apply more pressure. Let's say g3. This bishop has no hope of ever getting into the game. King h8. Again, the computer just wants to take or just shuffle the pieces or go for this and try and play this. It's completely hopeless. Completely hopeless. White is going to get crushed. And I mean, at all times, by the way, may I point out, let's say that my opponent doesn't take and goes rook a to e1. We can always do this, and after rook takes, go knight e4. And this is a knight that can be never be removed. So the best move is to do this, which, I mean, that's very sad. Very sad. So my opponent takes, rook f6, bishop e4, rook e4. I mean, it's all very simple. We trade all the pieces, try and open up the king. My plan here was bishop takes, king h1, and queen e6, which I thought was very, very nice. Essentially, I thought it forced the move rook f1. You could advance the h-pawn as well. And here we just have a completely dominant position. Queen e4 forces a queen trade because of this. So something, so something like this, and I mean, white is dead lost. So h3, take, queen takes, force the queen trade. And I mean, this is just a very, very simple endgame. Create a bit of a force field to stop the king from entering the position. And yeah, don't stalemate white, obviously. Yeah, don't stalemate, but here, king h3 is the only move. Queen h1 would have been mate, so my opponent resigned. I hope you guys enjoyed this game. It was a bit of a smooth ride, to be fair. If you want to check out another Slav Defense, then look at this video over here. And if you want to see the previous episodes of the speedrun, check out the playlist down there. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in one of those videos.